Hi guys, welcome back to Frosty Eye Candy and welcome to my new how I mix my paints and pigments video. I've had a few messages asking me to do a video and I also thought it time to update my existing how I mix my paints video because that's about a year old now on YouTube. Not that it's obsolete or anything like that. The ingredients that I use in that video are still perfectly valid. They're available, all apart from the color to go, of course. And I thought it was time to update my video because I now use these ingredients. I use Behr 8300 that I get from Home Depot, and I use Jo Sonja gloss varnish that I get together with these little 2-ounce pots from www.fluid-art.co. It's the fluidart company. They're a small new company selling pigments and all of the supplies you need to do acrylic pouring. And I like supporting them because, again, they're a small new company and they have a fantastic customer service ethic, and they're just pretty great all around. So I tried these new ingredients rather than the ones that were in the first video because I wanted to see how they compared. And to be honest, I actually prefer these ingredients rather than the ones in the first. But again, just to say, that first video is very valid, very informative and educational, and I give away some tips and tricks in that video too. So, first thing I do with the Behr 8300 is I decant it, because a gallon bucket is a bit difficult to work out of. I decant it into one of these mason jars. I say it's a little difficult to work out of, it's not really, but I paint in my kitchen and I have limited space. So I like anything that can kind of utilize that space to its best advantage. Anyway, another difference in that first video was that I was using these little 2-ounce ramekins that I got from the dollar store, or the 2-ounce little solo cups, the shot cups that I got from the dollar store. These are absolutely great and they're fine. I use these little cups because they're the same size, they're 2 ounces, but 2 ounces in this little cup is up to about this line here. So it still gives you a little bit of room to work and to move and to stir the paint. And plus they have these great little airtight seals, so any paint left over stays great for a good long while. Anyway, so they're the few of the main differences from our first video. And I have received some messages asking me to explain and show how I mix up my Liquitex gouache. Now this gouache is just a little bit thicker than the soft body acrylic. So the soft body acrylic, you need to just use maybe a little dash more, but we'll get to that in a minute. So that's the Liquitex that I was asked to show you how I mix them up. I've also got one of my favorite piggies right here. This is asparagus. There you go, my friends. Gorgeous, gorgeous mid-green color with a beautiful gold flash shimmer to it. So we're going to mix up some of that so I can show you how I mix my pigments. And I'm also going to show you how I mix up my golden, because golden is a heavy body acrylic, so it's really thick. So you need a bit less of it than you do of the Liquitex. And again, we'll get to that when we are mixing that paint. So the first thing I do, my friends, is I don't measure anymore. I just really kind of eyeball it and go by eye. So first thing I do with my little pots here is I'll fill them up with the Jo Sonja glass to about that little mark on the bottom there. Bingo. There we go, you see. Now, let's mix up the pigment first. So the pigments, I've got to warn you, pigments are quite dangerous. You want to open them away from you, or ideally, if you're going to use them, you really should be wearing a mask. I'm not for the sake of this video, so I'm not sounding all muffled, but another good tip and trick that I have found with the pigments when you order them, when they're delivered, I live a mile above sea level, so they're under pressure usually when they arrive. And the worst thing really is when you go to open them and they go poof like this, and then you get this big puff of the mica and the pigment everywhere, and that is really not what you want to get in your lungs. That's really quite dangerous. So a good tip I've found is I always have a wet microfiber here, and with new pigments, if you're worried about them being under pressure and popping, so to speak. Just have the wet microfiber over them and then slowly twist the pot until you either feel the lid come off or you hear that little pop of the seal, and then you're going to catch all the mica in this rag, and you're certainly not going to breathe it. Okay, friends? So that's Frosty's Safety Tips 101. Excuse me while I just have a drink of water. Excellent. So with the pigment, we're going to open it right away from our cells. It should be fine. I've already opened this one before, so it's not going to be under pressure or anything like that. Just going to take this, there we go. So what I'm going to do here is show you with one of these little sticks. These are great little mixing sticks. Again, I get these from the Fluidart Co. They're awesome to actually use. I used to use the little wooden stirring sticks, but at the end of the session, I'd have to clean them up and, you know, sit them somewhere so they dried and didn't stick together. These little plastic stirring spoons are fantastic because you can just literally wipe them clean with your microfiber at the end of the session and just put them in the pot. It's fantastic. So anyway, this is how much pigment I'm going to use. And we're going to be mixing up probably about maybe 1.5 ounces or so of paint here. Okay, guys? So I'm always on the generous side with my pigments because I just love their saturated color. So we're going to grab about this much. Okay, you see? It's not a huge amount. It's not hugely heaped. It's just the little end part of the spoon that's got the mica on it. Now we're going to very gently just tap this into the pot. As you can see, just tap, 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 holding it away from ourselves because even though we can't see it, there will be some pigment and mica just in the air just there. So I like giving it a little blow. So again, what we're going to do now is just gently just move the pigment around on the top of the Jo Sonja gloss and just get the whole top covered in pigment. And we just leave that just for a second. I like to just leave it for a second before we start to really kind of agitate it and move it, and then finally really start mixing in. If we just leave it for that couple of seconds first on the top of the water tension, or, you know, the surface tension of the varnish, it will start to absorb from the bottom and it will just draw everything above it straight into the mixture without hopefully any lumps or anything like that. So we give this a good stir. Now, good trick with these little pots is they're square, so I can just gently pat out the mixture on the side of the pot because it's flat. And if there are any little tiny little lumps or anything like that, we can pat them out and they're gone. So we have a nice saturation like this. Okay, so now I'm gonna just show you what this looks like. Absolutely gorgeous color, the asparagus. So beautiful. Okay, now you can see some bubbles in there. Don't worry about that. We shall get rid of those. So, like I said, I don't measure anymore as such. I just eyeball it. So, let's get the bare 8300. Now, I've just got a dessert spoon here. And I just usually grab about that much. About an egg yolk. And then let's put this in the pot. And then with one microfiber right here, clean it up immediately. So any of the pigment or anything like that is on this rag and we can safely wash it away. So we're going to give this a little mix up. Mix, 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 mix. And what we're looking for is a really nice consistency. We want it to hold up for a second or two when it wants to drizzle off actually at the end of our stirring stick. And then that drizzle wants to hold up on the top of the paint for a minute or for a second or two before dispersing back down into itself. I hope I'm making sense and not confusing people. So here we go. Beautiful, absolutely gorgeous color. But the consistency is the important thing here. So let's just have a look. I chose this color because I was hoping that it would be a good color for the camera to pick up. As you can see, this is drizzling really nicely, but it's falling down back into itself super quickly. So this is still a little bit thin. Excuse me friends, that was another quick break for a sip of water. So we need a little bit more of the Behr 8300. So this time, around about there, about half a yolk this time. And let's just put that in there. And we give this a good mix. And already I can feel it. There's a slight little bit more resistance on the stirring stick to the thickness of the paint. There we go, that's mixed nicely. And now let's show you the consistency. See, it's still falling back in on itself just a little bit quickly. So I'd want that just a little bit thicker. But the more of the Behr 8300 we add, we are actually diluting the initial solution of the varnish and the pigment. So what I'm going to show you here is a really clever, neat trick that if you want to add more pigment to this, people say you can't just put pigment straight in this. It will make lumps and it won't work very well. Well, I'm about to show you a trick where you can. So what we're going to do, again, if you remember when I first put the pigment in, I let it sit on the top of the varnish in there before I started to agitate it and move it around. So what we're going to do is the same trick again, where we're just going to grab a little bit of the pigment, around about that much. We want to add that much more, okay? And now what we do is we just gently, away from ourselves so we're not breathing this air, we just gently tap it over on the top of the surface of the liquid that's in there. Now we leave it now just for another few seconds like we did the first time, because the moisture in that solution there is already started to wet and absorb the pigment on the bottom layer that we've just put in there. So we just leave that for, I don't know, 5 or 10 seconds. And unfortunately, you're gonna have to listen to me talk for a little bit more while we just wait for, like I said, the bottom base layer of that pigment to start to be absorbed. And then it's really gonna make the top layer absorb much easier into the rest of the solution. Here we go, guys. You can see it's just sitting on the top there. Now, when I stand up, now we're gonna just slightly move it around with the stir stick, not go crazy and start to stir it very quickly, because then we could get lumps. But if we just keep patting it around on the surface, just like this, and now I can see it's a very thin layer of the pigment that's left on the top, on the surface, and you're not going to get any lumps. Okay, so let's mix that in. And we're certainly not going to get any lumps, especially if we do that little trick that I said. You use the flat edge of the pot with the flat edge of the stirring stick, and you just pat out the whole solution against the edge, and that will get rid of any little lumps that you might still have in there. So that's how I mix up my pigment. Now let's see the thickness of it here. Yeah, it's still just a little bit thin. So we're going to add a little more of the Behr 8300. And now we've got a good I said we were going to mix up about an ounce to ounce and a half. I think we've mixed up a good 2 ounces here, nearly, almost. But that's fine because this pigment is for a commission I'm working on. And I need a lot of the green, so that's absolutely fine. So now let's see the consistency. Right, see how it starts to hold up now, just for a little bit longer, and then it sinks back down into itself. So I would say that's pretty damn good. Yep, I'm liking the consistency there. So that's our pigment. So now we're going to do the gouache. So again, I'm going to put in about the same up to here on the little 2 ounce part. I swear I saw a drip go somewhere. So there you go. And now we're going to add to that our gouache. So again, when we start to add these paints to the varnish and then to the Behr 8300, they're going to start to dilute. So I like to use quite a good generous squirt of the gouache as I do the soft body acrylic. And again, I don't measure. I'm just going to show you right now. And I always, well, you can always add a little more of these to the end product to richen and deepen up the color if you like. But I'm going to go straight in and just give it a good squirt. Okay, there you go. That was the squirt. I'm going to mix this up. You don't necessarily need to do it this order to put it in the varnish first. It's just because I haven't got any of the pouring medium mixed up yet. So there we go, we're already mixed there. And let me just give you a close up. You can see the nice vibrancy and depth of the color here. And this is the fluorescent opera pink gouache from Liquitex. Excuse me for another drink break. Okay, so I'm going to grab a little bit more this time, like a really good double yolk. I'm going to let that little bit drip off. There we go. Good double yolk. There we go. So I'd say that's a good ounce of the Behr 8300 I put in this, and now we're just going to mix this up. Mixy, mixy, mixy. Now, as you can see, the color has started to just a little kind of diluted a bit because, you know, we have added a lot of varnish and Behr 8300 to the gouache. You can see it's drizzling really nicely and it's kind of holding up just for a second or two. So this is actually looking really good and beautiful just off the first shot. Maybe just a little thin. It needs a little bit more of a mix up, but just to keep the depth of color, I'm going to put a little bit more of this in, and I can show you what I mean by the dilution of the color. Okay, so we're just going to put a little bit just to strengthen the color, but you can see now this was the color and this is it now mixed down. So we do dilute the colors a little bit when we mix them with all the varnish and the Behr 8300. So I'm just going to give this a real good stir. And when you're doing this, you might have to stir for a little bit longer, you know. But now let's see. Yep, that's great. Very similar to my pigment. And let's just do a test. You can see the pigment's full of bubbles. I'm just going to pause for a minute and show you the trick to get rid of some of these bubbles. It's really quite easy, just a gentle tap on the table, just like you were tapping out a cake mixture if you're baking. But as you can see, look, all the bubbles are gone. It's really quite good. There are still some minute ones in there, and that's what people leave their mixtures overnight for, to remove. But anyway, there you go. You can see the consistency, how it's drizzling nicely and staying up for a minute. compared with, and let's get rid of these bubbles. And there you go, you can see the consistency of the gouache, the opera pink. Excellent. So that's the pigment, and that's the Liquitex tube paint. Now we're going to use, yes, and of course, tube paint. I've been asked, you know, what's this? This isn't a tube, so why are you calling it a tube paint? We call anything that isn't a pigment a tube paint. So anything that you didn't have to mix up into a pouring medium, like the Bear and the gloss, anything you didn't have to mix up into that where it wasn't powder to begin with, so something like this. Anything like this will be classed as a tube paint. So this is quite obviously a tube paint, but we class this as a tube paint too. Okay, friends? And also, let's just grab something. Some of the deco art, folk art paints, we'll also refer to this and call it a tube paint, even though it's not technically in a tube, it's a bowl. Okay, so we got that cleared up. Excellent. So now we're gonna mix up the golden and the light phthalo blue. The first time I've actually got it right and said it in the right order. Light phthalo blue. It's from Golden. It's totally opaque, as we can see by the little square that's filled in here. Whereas the gouache we just mixed up is semi-opaque because it's got a half little triangle in the square there, meaning it's semi-opaque. So you can slightly see through it if you spread it out thin enough. This is going to be very much very, very thick and very pigmented paint. So let's start again with some Joe Sonia. Now I don't need quite as much of this, so I'm going to use just a little bit less. Oh no, let's just do for consistency. There we go. They're all the same right here. So you can see how I'm mixing my paints and how to get different viscosity paints to the same thickness for acrylic pouring. So here we go, we can see it's very, very thick coming out of the tube. It will hold its shape totally until we actually mush it. So we don't need very much of this at all. This will really thicken up the varnish on its own. So I'm going to show you, we only need about this much, okay? And if we need any more, we're going to measure it like this and put it in. But this is what we're going to start with. And apologies if you can hear bubbling in the background. That's my bolognese sauce cooking for dinner, just simmering nicely there. Okay, so you can see we've got a beautiful color here, and it didn't really dilute or lose any of its vibrancy from being added to the varnish. It really is heavily, heavily pigmented paint. So you're just gonna have to bear with me while I stir this in because it is quite thick, and I have to pat it out on each side just to make sure all those lumps are gone. Okay, so that's pretty much nicely mixed, dispersed in the varnish. So now we're going to add our Bear. Now again, we're going to grab a nice double yolk, okay guys, on the end of the spoon. So a good, I'm calling it, if you want to measure it, it's going to be a good ounce. Now, I'm not using gloves either. I prefer not to use gloves. I am in the building and decorating and painting trade for my work, and I work with paints all day long, and I choose not to wear gloves when I'm acrylic pouring because I prefer to use my little microfiber there that you may have just seen me cleaning my hands up on. But whenever I resin, absolutely, gloves are mandatory when we're resining. And I've been asked to make a resin video to show you how I can get such a nice finish just in one shot. And I shall be doing that very soon in the next month or so. But anyway, that's enough of me chatting. Now let's look at the paint and the consistency. So there you go, friends. It's holding up for about a second or so. But I'm going to call it and say that's just a little bit too thin still. Let's just compare it. Look at those bubbles go. So there we go. That's our pigment. Another little tap. Bye-bye, bubbles. And that's our Liquitex gouache. Holding up just for a second or two. I'm thinking that really maybe, yeah, this light phthalo blue is just a little on the thin side. I'm just going to put a little bit more in, and by a little bit more, I mean a little bit more. So we're just going to do that, okay? Really just bring up the amount in there to the 2 ounces. Excellent, now we're going to do mixing. I hope you all are enjoying the background music while I'm just mixing and fast forwarding through these, not fast forwarding, but double timing through the mixing part, because yeah, we all know how to mix paint. Excellent, okay guys, now look. See how it's now just really holding up? Just like the pigment, just like the gouache. Beautiful. Excellent. Well, there we go, my friends. So that's how I mix up my pigments, my heavy body acrylics, and my soft body acrylics. I'm really hoping you liked this new mixing video. Please, please, please hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, smash that subscribe button. I could use all the subscriptions I could get. I need all the support I get just to carry on making you these videos and having a great time whilst doing it. Thank you all, my friends, and we will see you very soon.